afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to our annual event, the Friends of Jawdat Haydar. We are very happy and honored to have you here this afternoon. And we would like to welcome our guest speaker, Dr. Ramzi Ya Allah. Salti. I am speaking on the behalf of Dr. Vahid Bahmardi, my chair, who could not be here this afternoon. And we want you all hopefully to have a very comfortable afternoon and a very fruitful afternoon. Introducing our guest, the lecture will be combining East and West Jawdat Haydar's unique school of thought, and just a very short synopsis of Dr. Salti and who he is. Probably some of you don't know the details. Dr. Ramzi Salti has been a lecturer in Arabic studies at Stanford University since the year 1999. He has taught a wide array of courses in several other universities in the United States and Jordan. His field of interest includes Arabic cultural productions, postcolonial theory, pop culture, and the use of technology to enhance language proficiency in the classroom. Dr. Salti has published a collection of short stories under the title The Native Informant and Other Stories, 6 Tales of Defiance from the Arab World. He consistently publishes essays and articles in such journals as World Literature Today, the International Fiction Review, the Journal of Arabic Literature, and Notes on Contemporary Literature. His doctoral dissertation, which surveys the misrepresentations of marginalized sexualities in Arabic literature, has been published in several scholarly journals. I'd also like to add that Dr. Salti also hosts a weekly radio show in Arabology. And it airs from Stanford Radio. So for those of you living in the United States, please tune in. Dr. Salti, the floor is yours. Ahlan wa sahlan.
Thank you, Muna Shaheen. I just met her, and I already feel she is like my soul sister. Thank you, Muna. As for the radio show, it is called Arabology, and you don't have to be in the U.S. to hear it. The podcasts are available online at arabology.org. But I'm not here to talk about me today. I'm going to try my best today to create an ambiance of tolerance, of peace, of inner peace, and of love, and of cooperation that I think still defines the soul of Lebanon. So I have to tell you that my relationship with the late Jawdat Haydar is a very spiritual one. I don't know if any of you have been through a difficult time and were seeking solace in literature, and suddenly something comes your way and it elevates you and it helps you through a difficult time. This is what happened to me. I was going through a little bit of a health issue back then, and here comes Jawdat Haydar's poetry my way. By coincidence, some say. I say it's more like maktub. It was written that this would happen. And it elevated me. It elevated my soul. It elevated my spirit at a time when I needed it. And so it reiterates in my mind the way we see poetry. And how can poetry that was written a while ago help us today? Can it help us? Or is it something that has been written and frozen in time? My whole thesis today is that anybody here can benefit from Jawdat Haydar's poetry, that you have to be a global citizen of the world to relate to him, and I think we all qualify. At the same time, we're going to be looking a little bit at the way his Middle Eastern identity, his identity as a Lebanese poet, interacts with his global identity and his Western identity. I'm going to posit the notion that he was able to write in English at a level that was as proficient as Byron, at the same time was able to write in Arabic with the Fusha that we will hear in songs today, inshallah. So in a world where academia tends to be a little bit elitist, and I'm at Stanford, I've been there 25 years. I say this all the time to my students. When you have an academic world where you take a poet like Jawdat Haydar, a poet of the people, and you put him in an ivory tower, you cut off the new generation from his poetry. It makes you feel, makes some young people feel, students, that this poetry is beyond me, this poetry is not something that can enhance my daily life. And I think that once you sit with young people, and I see quite a few around me today, and you have them just listen to the poem, suddenly they'll feel like, oh wow, this could have been written about me or about my friend or about my parents, or, you know, and this happened when we did a small lecture at the Kaslik. I noticed that Lebanese audiences during the Q&A session don't tend to be very vocal. And I respect that. I think it's cultural, especially for students. They don't really speak out right away, at least at Kaslik. But once you get them comfortable, and once you just tell them that there is no wrong answer, you get jawahir, you get treasures, you get words of wisdom. And today I hope to get that from you. Tonight is not about me, obviously. It's about Jawdat Haydar and how his poetry still today is going to, inshallah, resonate with everybody. So I titled the talk, Combining East and West, Jawdat Haydar's Unique School of Thought. And there I have to begin by saying, you know, we're talking about a school of thought. We're not talking about just a poet. We're talking about a poet who established his own school of thought. We say in Arabic, huwa madrasa, مش بس شاعر, huwa madrasa. And not every poet can be a madrasa. And so just like, I don't know, in music we talk about the rahabne as being, you know, madrasat rahabne. In poetry, we're talking about Madrasat Jawdat Haydar. We're talking about his school of thought that still continues to influence new poets and new writers even today, me being one of them. So as you know, Jawdat Haydar passed away in 2006, and here I have to tell you that on December 4th, coming up, will be the 16th anniversary of his passing. So it's quite significant to stand in front of you today and to be so close to that date. He passed away, as I said, in 2006. This is the 16th time they do this. Friends of Jawdat Haydar. Amazing work they're doing. Okay, let me begin by introducing you to my colleagues at Stanford and to tell you right away that anybody who came here today qualifies for VIP treatment at Stanford. All you have to do is look me up, Ramzi Salti, and tell me I came to the Jawdat Haydar talk, and you will find the red carpet waiting for you. We really love the cooperation that's happening between LAU and Stanford, and I'm so proud to be a bridge in between both institutions. So as you can see here, this was an event that we organized at Stanford a few days before the campus shut down because of the pandemic. So this was a live person. These pictures are real. They're not Zoom screenshots. And as you can see, I'm surrounded by people from Stanford and from LAU. I wish I had time to thank each one of them, but the video of this talk about Jawdat Haydar, this event at Stanford, is available online. All you have to do is Google, I don't know, Stanford Jawdat Haydar, and you'll be able to see it. The poet's daughter was instrumental in helping me organize this event, Madame Shahina, who actually was not able to attend in person, so she had to rely on a recording. But today the poet's daughter is with us, so that also adds another dimension of emotionality for me to have her here. If you know Shahina, she's not one who would like the spotlight on her, but I do want to mention that there is a video secret video online, which includes my interview with Shahina, where she talks about her daughter. That was part of my radio show. So if you'd like to see that, that is available online. And then there's videos with highlights from the event that's spotlighted Jawdat Haydar, featuring my colleagues, Professor Alexander Key, who teaches comparative literature in Arabic at Stanford, Dr. Khalid Abeid, Dr. Khalil Barhoum, and Dr. Thuraya Abu Mahdi, all of whom are on board and send you their love from Stanford. They're teaching over there. I'm here having an amazing time with you guys, and yesterday I went to Z'ita. I feel guilty that I'm doing work while they're on campus over there, my colleagues. So this event really inspired many other events, and this is the latest in this series. To talk about Jawdat Haydar's biography would require, I think, an entire lecture, and that would only scratch the surface. Let me just give you a quick look at the website, which is very well maintained. Have you seen Jawdat Haydar's website at jawdathaydar.org? It has such an amazing archive of the poet, what the press said about him in Arabic, in English, in French, so instead of wasting your time taking you through the website, which is worth your time, I think you should explore the website on your own, and you'll find yourself clicking on links and finding press coverage and even recordings featuring the poet's voice himself, which is very haunting and beautiful at the same time. So jawdathaydar.org. This article in the Daily Star sort of summarizes what I wanted to talk about today. And that is the poet's legacy is one of breaking down barriers between East and West. So when we talk about Jawdat Haydar, immediately we are in a space where we want to categorize the poet. That seems to be academic, that seems to be instinctive, that people want to categorize you. I'm not quite sure we need to categorize him, and so I'm not going to put him in a category. Is he Gibran-like? I don't like that comparison. I don't think it's a fair comparison. But people think, well, because he wrote in English and Gibran wrote in English, then there must be a similarity. I am arguing that they're completely different schools, and that what Jawdat Haydar did with English, the way he mastered the English language, rivaled any Western writer. So we're, with Gibran, we could get into this, and I'm very afraid to go into this in Lebanon, where Gibran is so beloved. But Gibran's work also was guided by Mary Haskell, and I think that was a beautiful combination. And I think sometimes women don't get the role that they deserve, an acknowledgement for it in literature. And I think that in Gibran's case, there is a beautiful spiritual bond that was happening as Mary Haskell and Gibran were writing in English. Of course, Gibran would be another lecture altogether, but I did want to say from the beginning that I'm insisting that Jawdat Haydar needs to be seen as his own school of thought and not to be seen as a replica, God forbid, of Gibran, who, by the way, is one of my favorite poets. So here we go. This is a beautiful headline that summarizes what the Arabic press sees. I'm going to turn it over to Hussam to read the headline.
جودة حيدر مئوي يمتطي صهوتي اللغتين شاعرا ساعيا وراء النور مدججا بالحياة لم يترجل.
So if you speak Arabic, I'm sure you got that vision of him straddling two horses or straddling two different roles. So I love it. First of all, centenarian. He lived to be over 100, and as you may know, at 101, published a diwan called 101 Poems, I guess one for each year in his life. But more than that, I love the visuals of him being able to jump from one horse to another. I don't know if you grew up watching Westerns, but the idea of being able to easily straddle both cultures is very difficult. There's always going to be a sort of conflict between identities, and I do not think that he had this conflict. I think that he was able to write in English the way an English speaker or poet would be able to write, and then put on his Arabic hat, and suddenly you have this beautiful Fusha, which I think will be illustrated today through the songs that we are going to enjoy together, inshallah. Here are some more articles taken from the private collection of the Haydar family. This exhibition will be available today, so you can actually see these periodicals in person. There's something about touching of a piece of work that the poet wrote with his own hand. Those are available today, inshallah. We can go look at them together after the talk. Okay, بالنسبة للعنوان الثاني.
جودة حيدر شاعر القرن وشكسبير العرب.
والثانية.
جودة حيدر شاعر الإنجليزية والعربية لا يتعب بعلبك تتحلق حوله وتقتبس من قنديله المئوي.
So again, do you see the Shakespeare of the Arabs? I wonder how you feel about this, like the Arabian Shakespeare, the Arab Shakespeare, the Shakespearean Arab, no matter how you want to translate it. I mean, I wonder if this, I wonder how this is coming across. Is it coming across like he is Shakespeare-like? He's been influenced by Shakespeare, or is it coming across like there is if there were an Arabian Shakespeare, would it be Jawdat Haydar? Again, I think I'm seeing it. I think I'm seeing it that way too. Again, an amazing collection you can look at today after the talk, inshallah. I know many people worked very hard to bring it to you today. All right, I'm going to talk a little bit about this idea of language and linguistic exile. These are snippets by and about Jawdat Haydar in terms of the language. Again, I'm trying to bring this back today to Arabic and English, and this unique ability for him to write in both languages and not be sort of in the middle. This linguistic exile reflects the sense of alienation in some of his poems. Haydar always considered his poetry as straddling two cultures. Immediately we're talking about straddling two cultures. I mean, we've got the same kind of imagery in both English and Arabic publications. These quotes here, which I won't read in detail, were from the poetry of Jawdat Haydar, and which was published in Oxford University by Sahar Hamouda in 2016. So again, I want to point to the idea of how language functions in terms of identity, and how rare it is to have a poet who's able to switch languages and switch cultures and excel in both languages. There's always, in my mind, a conflict that's going to happen, which happens in my own writing. You know, if I'm writing in English, I'm so aware that I'm thinking in Arabic, so I'm writing in a different kind of English-Arabic. That is not the case with Jawdat Haydar. When you read his poems or his work in English, he rivals any English. And I think that is what's so unique about him. Another example here by Ahmad Abdelmouti Hijazi. This was part of a speech that was delivered at the Library of Alexandria when they celebrated Jawdat Haydar in 2005. And so again, I just translated a little bit about his poetry. Was not simply a profession or a mere talent, and he never wrote just to fill in space. He sought to carefully, even silently, look within himself with humility and without any need to rush. It's this contemplative nature of the poems. And I think maybe today we could all use that. I know all of you came from a very hectic day and are going to leave into a very hectic day. So inshallah, this poetry and this moment together will remind us of the way the poetry can help us get through the day. So you have on the screen two poems celebrating two different poets. You got Mikhail Naimi and you got Lord Byron. Same writer, writing in English, celebrating an Arab poet who passed and Lord Byron. Let me just pick a line and see what you think. Talking about Naimi. So he turned over the pages of life, and with the wings of thought to the no end, beyond the stars and beyond, keeping the strife to conquer all the more and comprehend how to climb the slopes of the future heights, thereupon penetrate into the core of the infinite, where the visioned sights were his target endeavor to explore. It's a beautiful elegy for Naimi, but at the same time compare it to what he wrote about Lord Byron. The sovereign bard of the mighty roar, who mounted the steed to Rome, Greece, and Spain, foot in stirrup trotting from shore to shore, a triumph made on the watery plain. Ever since, the world has written your name on the wave that made the ocean of your fame. Do you see the same sense of pride in being influenced by Byron as being influenced by an Arab poet who had passed away? I think this is that unique ability of being able to feel like you were influenced by Western and Middle Eastern or Arab writers, and that formed the core of his identity. Now with Gibran, and I mentioned before that I'm not a big fan of those people who immediately compare Jawdat Haydar to Gibran, but I think I would be amiss if I didn't mention that indeed he did write about Gibran. There are two pieces that stood out. I'm only going to focus on one today. Notice in this poem for Gibran that there is sort of a father-son conversation that's happening between Jawdat Haydar and Gibran. Of course, it's fictional, and that there are concepts of the narrator, the other, and the reader in there. Let the poem itself dictate how we should feel. Torrential waters collapsing, swallow speed tunneled out of the cave a stream, gargling throat, falling braids, baltering over mountain steep, tousled squattering bubbles on the lake, swaying breezily, a waltz moving rounds, rejoicing to be debating to while away, leaning gracefully, reeling swoon and pop, to fall zillions of grains, as if blown of sand around a stone, the shape of man, having two birds perching on fingertips, gazing at the universe as if mapping its perplexity. I don't know how you can read such a poem and not feel the kind of spontaneous, almost contradictory feelings that happen when you're creating a work of art. This is for Gibran. Another poem that always means a lot to me is the elegy for his son Bassam. I know that this is very emotional for Jawdat Haydar's family today. But again, I think this is part of the way poetry can revive memories. And I think when you're writing an elegy for a son, it's always going to be difficult. I always say, the natural order of things is usually people pass away before their children. So when your child passes away before you, it puts you in a very unique situation. This is a shelter of tears. O time, what a trap of smiles you have made. My spring days were so delightful to taste, but now I feel the keen edge of your blade. I suffer, take me to your bosom in haste. The same idea of Ratha or elegy for his son was also written about in Arabic. And anybody who knows anything about Jawdat Haydar knows how much he had an affinity with the sea, al-Bahar. This combines elegy with his love for the sea, which, by the way, deserves a lecture of its own, the way he uses imagery and the sea. This is from Wujudi La Wujud, which then was recorded by Abir Naameh, who has a beautiful voice, and she recorded it. Most people know it, I guess, in Lebanon as Weshwish. So I tell them, have you read Wujudi La Wujud? And they go, no, but we know Weshwish, murmur. It's a beautiful little melody. We're going to listen to 2 lines from Wujudi La Wujud before we listen to Abir Naameh. Hussam, لو سمحت.
وجودي لا وجود، وشوش شواطئك الرملية يا بحر، لو علمت ما بها لعلمت سر الوجود والخلود.
وشوش شواطئك الرملية يا بحر، وشوش شواطئك الرملية يا بحر. لو علمت ما بها لعلمت سر الوجود والخلود. لو علمت ما بها لعلمت سر الوجود والخلود.
So, of course, you can hear the song in its entirety on YouTube, but what a moment. And the second and last song I'm going to play today, to show the Arabic Fusha quality that is so easily lendable to music, is one by May Nasser. I don't want to repeat stories, but I will. 2 weeks ago, I was at a party, and I was getting ready to come to Lebanon, which is very emotional for me because we left before the Civil War. And I'm ready to try to speak about Jawdat Haydar to the Lebanese, to his people. And hadn't realized that May Nasser had recorded a Jawdat Haydar song. But anyway, so I'm at a party, and somebody said, May Nasser is here. Well, May Nasser to me is an amazing artist, and I'd played her songs on the radio, because as Muna mentioned, I have a radio show that seeks to spotlight Arabic cultural productions to Americans. So it's in English, but everything I use is in Arabic. And so I had played May Nasser quite a few times. I'd never met May Nasser, and somebody at the party said, hey, Ramzi, DJ Ramzi, not Dr. Salti. DJ Ramzi, come and meet May Nasser. And of course, she came up to me and said, thank you so much for playing my CD and for speaking about it. I translated a lot of it into English for our listeners. And I said to her, I'm going to Lebanon and I'm going to speak about Jawdat Haydar. And so she goes, Jawdat Haydar? I met Jawdat Haydar. I know Jawdat Haydar. Jawdat Haydar changed my life. And I said, how so? And she says, well, I sat with him. She described a lot of personal feelings she had that were all very positive but emotional. And she said to me that he picked this poem and said, Ya binti, my daughter, you should put it to music. And she did. But by the time she did, he had passed away, so he never heard it. But it is here, and it adds a new dimension. And if you feel like I do, that he is with us today, then maybe these words will resonate with you personally and through his spirit. Allah yarhamu. Hussam.
كن سريعا كلحاظ العين ارتفاعا وانظر من الأفق إلى الهوادي في البحر أبدا عطشا للحرية تسجد وبقدرة قادر تنهض كالمصلي ما بين المد والجزر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر لقد أيقنت أن الهوادي آمنت بالإنجيل والقرآن دينا وأنا أنظر إليها تركع بخشوع وتعمد الشواطئ وتصلي صلاة الغروب والفجر.
كن سريعا كلحاظ العين ارتفاعا وانظر من الأفق إلى الهوادي أبدا عطشا للحرية تسجد وبقدرة قادر تنهض كالمصلي ما بين المد والجزر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر لقد أيقنت أن الهوادي آمنت بالإنجيل والقرآن دينا وأنا أنظر إليها تركع بخشوع تعمد الشواطئ وتصلي صلاة الغروب والفجر.
So I don't think I need to tell you how easily the lyrics lend themselves to music. And that is an indication of the way the fusha, his fusha, was made to be recited if not sung. Two samples today, Abi Name and May Nasser. And both of them were able to create a haunting melody based on the powerful lyrics. And just maybe looking at some of your faces today, I think you felt it. You felt a sort of relation to the song, a sort of affinity. And the words themselves seem so applicable to what's going on today. I'm talking about perhaps the line here with the Bible and the Quran, and the whole idea of the ta'ayush that I think is still at the core of people in Lebanon, but that tends to be sometimes chaotic and manipulated. So I'm going to leave you with some sayings which I hope you can apply to yourselves, your friends, your environment, people in your life. Let's see what he said about women and see if you agree.
المرأة ولدت من عيون الزمان وحطت في داخلي كما حطت الشمس في داخل الدنيا لتحييها.
So his view on women were very progressive. Woman was not only partner with man, there's another poem in which he says she's the very pulse. But this kind of proclamations about equality and gender equality is at the core of anything called postcolonial feminism today. This idea of feminism being a Western construct, or is it a global construct, or is there an Arab or Lebanese concept of feminism? No matter what you want to call it, and I know the term feminism doesn't resonate well with many people, but the term equality should. And I think the fact that Jawdat Haydar was speaking about women's emancipation, women's minds, women's spirits, and putting them not only on par with men, but making them so essential to the survival of mankind, I think is seen in verses like this. There's another one that I think I'm going to share with you, with the tolerance that he lived with, especially in Lebanon, when we think about the Ta'ifiyya. Let's see.
من يحارب دينا من الأديان السماوية مثله مثل من يطلق النار على نجم ليجعل من شعاعه بيض عتمة من الظلام.
How powerful is it to compare insulting one of the religions or speaking against one of the great religions with somebody who is actually shooting a bullet into darkness? I mean, why would anybody want to do that when we're so filled with light? A few sayings to take with you in English. I'd like the second pair of the 3 lines in the second paragraph. Think about this. You shouldn't recall what you shouldn't remember. You shouldn't remember what you should forget. Close your open door to a painful memory. I don't know what I can say about this, because each one of you is going to relate to it differently, and each of us has that experience. But the way it also builds into a crescendo of the first line, the second line, and the third line. Let me talk about literature. Literature is a forest of thoughts, growing trunks of culture within the perimeter of knowledge, bearing the perdurable fruits of excellent in a written language. So next time somebody tells you, define literature. And finally, time has no time to time its time while eating itself. Hey, بدها دقيقة to let it sink in. But again, think of this, think of how universal it is, and think how we can all relate to it. These are the kind of sayings that I wish would be part of the curriculum in schools in Lebanon. Why is Jawdat Haydar not part of the curriculums in all schools? I don't understand. He resonates so well in America. And students at Stanford who have nothing to do with Lebanon devour him and his poetry. And here, sadly, I don't think there is the reverence and appreciation that should be happening. That is happening today. This is a great start. But again, I mean, I really want to push for more inclusion of Jawdat Haydar in curriculums, especially in Lebanon. We should be so proud of him. Allah yarhamu. So I'm going to say thank you for a very emotional moment. I know I took a long time, and I would love to hear your thoughts. I apologize if I rambled on a little bit, but Jawdat Haydar is my weakness. And every lecture I give, I feel like I'm doing something for someone I wish I had met. And I never met him. I know many of you have, but I know you have memories that can also give you comfort. So I'd love to hear from you, whether it's a comment, whether it's the impact of one of the poems we read, whether it's a personal story. There is no wrong answers here, but I would love to hear how Jawdat Haydar may have affected your life. Yes, please. Ahlaki.
Thinking about gender equality, well, nowadays they're all working on sustainable development, and one of the goals is gender equality. Jawdat Haydar has spoken about it a long time ago. They're working on it nowadays.
Yeah. Remind me of your name. Ghada is speaking the truth. Ghada is really talking about the way Jawdat Haydar was able to tackle issues related to gender and even gender conformity back then, and how applicable it is today. And you know, there's always that patriarchal view of, what can a man in that age know about the plight of women? But again, it's right there, and I'm so happy you said something. Ava?
Hi, Ramzi. I was wondering if you use in your classes writings of Jawdat Haydar to help change the stereotype image that American students could have
Of the Middle East, yes. I mean, what a great question. Ava, who I don't want to embarrass her, but we worked beautifully together at Stanford. Before she deserted it and went back to her beloved Lebanon, is talking about the stereotypes we have of Middle Eastern poets, writers, etc. By Americans. What am I going to say? I mean, I'm a proud American, but I am very disillusioned with the way the Middle East, the Arab world specifically, gets demonized in Arabic media. So my answer was to create a radio show where I do the opposite, and I highlight the beautiful parts of our culture. And so using Jawdat Haydar in my classes is essential at Stanford. So if there are classes in Arabic, then I will use the Arabic poems, and hopefully just those lines about, about embracing religions, for example, about tolerance, seem to defy the stereotype that they want us to have, or as Americans, of the Arab world being inherently violent and being intolerant. So Jawdat Haydar is this beautiful way to dispel those stereotypes. And of course, he works equally well in English. So we can also use his poetry that's written in English to reach Americans in their own native language. And boy, are they impressed by the style and the prose level. Yes, sir.
He was influenced by Byron? Well, not influenced, but he has written a poem
Yes,
about Byron.
about Byron.
But you
Lord
think,
Byron.
I think he was, because Byron was in exile as well from his own community. Could there be a link? As in Jawdat Haydar was trying to talk about peace or trying to say something, and he felt exiled because of what he was saying through his.
So, what is
I'm
your
just
name?
interested because I can't see any other influence in the language. It's just interesting that he brings Byron up.
Yeah, I mean.
So I was just wanted to ask if you could add, to my
yes,
info.
I mean, you'd have to talk to a little bit about a classicist who's a specialist in Byron, but certainly being an English major, we read Byron. And the sense of exile that both poets said. What is your name? Omar. Ahlan Omar. Omar is really like, he goes back to the slide that I keep going back to, and that is how he can relate and be influenced by Western poets just as easily as Arab poets, and just put on these two lines. And I'm sure the sense of exile that both poets felt is something that they related to each other. Omar, you should be up here, Enta. Hey.
Influenced by Blake. Blake is like, you remember.
Yeah.
Blake is he's my inspiration.
And so Jawdat Haydar saw Byron down. Yeah.
He sends messages in his allusion to different poets. It's not like he's influenced, he's just saying something by using these poets. So that I find very interesting.
Yeah, but I think that your idea about using exile as a common theme between both, I think that is worth a paper. Omar, you should publish.
Just to add
Yes,
something
sir.
about Lord
Please,
Byron, if I'm
please.
not
Hey,
wrong,
please.
because Jawdat Haydar is my grandfather, and he told me the story where he wrote Lord Byron. He was in Chateau Chillon, where Lord Byron was a prisoner underground, and he visited the castle, and from there he got but I don't know which year was that.
And that was when he composed
That's when
this
he
poem?
wrote the poet.
This
poem.
is highly emotional, sir, because where else were we going to get somebody who's related to the poet tell you, I mean,
usually
these stories disappear along with the poet.
And I have a story about
Please,
Jiddu. He was around 75 years old at that time. And I wake up at 4:30 in the morning hearing a chisel and a hammer. So I make my coffee, I go down, and I find him digging holes there was behind his house a small piece of land with shallow rock. And he was making holes in the rock with the chisel and the hammer. And I told him, Jiddu, what are you doing? And he said, I'm opening some holes to plant apple trees. And I was 15, 14 then.
In the
I told
the
him,
rock.
Yeah, no, I mean, opening hole in the rock to put the trees in the soil.
Wow.
I told him, but are you going to eat from these trees? And he looked at me like this. He said, I'm planting them for you to eat from them, not for me.
Wow. Yeah.
And by the way, he ate from them, he removed them, and he planted new trees and died the next year.
Are they still around, inshallah? Keep it going. Wow. I don't need to comment about the symbolism of planting and poetry and I saw somebody else. Yes.
Okay, so good evening. I'm glad to meet you. It's a pleasure, first of all. And I'm Ibtisam Kahale. I know Jawdat Haydar, and I've taught his poems, and I've wrote about him a play.
Oh,
so
wow.
I know him very well. Now, to what has been said about his being like Byron or Keats or Shelley or Tennyson or whoever. In poetry, we don't see if someone writes about the sea, that doesn't make him an image of Byron. If he takes notice of his words, he chooses specific words, that doesn't make him Shelley. If he writes philosophy, that doesn't make him Blake. So Jawdat Haydar is a very, very unique poet who has lived 2 centuries and or a whole century, and he has given us bits and pieces of everything. Even his poetry, if you read it, you see a very simple poem, but if you go through it, you find something much deeper, much philosophical. So that's the greatness of the man. He is a philosopher in a very simple way.
Dr. Ibtisam, I wish I could take one of your classes, honestly. The way you put that. And again, I mean, I think you're pointing to how global the poetry is, but at the same time, how we can relate to it no matter where we are in terms of geographically.
That's very true.
And sort of,
he's universal.
Universal.
That's why we call him the Shakespearean of the Arab world.
Yeah.
Because he's universal. Shakespeare
so how do you translate Shakespeare al-Arab? Into English? Would you say the Arab Shakespeare, the Arabian Shakespeare, the Shakespearean Arab? I'm always wondering about that title.
The Arab Shakespearean, if you want, or Shakespearean Arab.
Right,
because he is Shakespearean in the universality of his poetry.
Yeah.
Not because he's like Shakespeare,
Exactly.
no way.
Exactly.
But he is universal in whatever he writes. If you read him after 10 years, after 20 years, before, you still find yourself within his poetry.
Wow. Your students are very lucky, Professor Ibtisam.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, there is no right answer because Shakespeare al-Arab, إضافة بالعربي, can be translated in a variety of ways. And I think I love that because it could be all of the above. It could be the Shakespeare of the Arabs, the Arabian Shakespeare, or the Shakespearean Arab even, It works on so many levels because it does point to the marriage, I think, between Western and Middle Eastern poetry. ما أحلاكم أنتو. You're amazing people. You are interacting with me and with the poetry so beautifully.
Hello, good evening, Doctor. Hope you're doing well.
Alhamdulillah.
I met you, I think 2 years ago in a webinar. You had given us webinar as Friends of Jawdat Haydar.
Oh my gosh, yes.
And my name is Doris Yunus. I would like to comment on Shakespeare being Arab Shakespeare.
Hey, please.
I can say that Shakespeare in his poems tried to break down stereotypes through, for instance, black people, saying that these black people should not be inferior. And he also went against classes like Jawdat Haydar and the dominance of West against the East through figures of black people and Middle East figures. So I think that's why they called him Shakespeare, Arab Shakespeare.
So you're thinking that the same way Shakespeare broached some of these themes back in his day is the way Jawdat Haydar was speaking out against sexism, against
Yes, but in his own,
racism.
of course, school. Yani, Shakespeare had his own experience in life and his own school, and Jawdat Haydar has his Middle Eastern school.
Yes, I like it because we want to be careful about not making him sort of be a Western worshipper or someone who wants to be Shakespeare-like, as if being Shakespeare-like is the goal. It isn't. I mean, a lot of people are influenced by Shakespeare and want to be Shakespeare or think they're Shakespeare or whatever, but it's about, setting up the role model here and not having Shakespeare, which is so Western, be like the goal. I think when you said he has his own school of thought, you hit the nail on the head. Yes, he's influenced by Shakespeare. There are many similarities, but he's not a replica of Shakespeare, nor is he a Shakespeare wannabe. And I think that's why his poetry holds today, while many other poets sort of disappear with time.
Yes, I agree with all what was said concerning using or alluding to some poets, Western or Eastern, but the objective is different.
Yes.
He wants to communicate different messages than what Byron wants to communicate to his society.
Well, I remember you, Doris, minute webinar. It's nice to see you in 3 dimensions.
Yes. Thank
So
you
sick
so
of
much.
Zoom
Same here.
and meetings with Zoom. Does anybody else want to comment before
Thank you.
we adjourn? Well, I am around, and even though I'm leaving Lebanon tomorrow, please look me up whenever you're thinking about coming to California or Stanford specifically. I really am honored to meet you all, and I know you're all busy, and I know there's a lot going on in Lebanon. For you to come and give us this hour of your time is a privilege for me, and I would love to give it back to you if you come to Stanford ever. Thank you, everybody, for coming. Oh, and thank you to Hussam. So I think we have an exhibition we can go look at. Okay, let me turn it over to the wonderful Muna who began.
This talk was inspirational. I am not. I come from a background of teaching English as a foreign language, so we're very technical in education. But today's lecture was inspiring. Was wonderful. Thank you very much for today. Thank you for coming. Thank you, Dr. Salti. We would like to invite you all downstairs. We're going down 1 floor to the memorial room of Jawdat Haydar, and it's in the library.